Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host, and with us this evening is Chelmsford's Chief of Police, James Spinney. Jim, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Sam. I appreciate it.
Well, we're very glad to have you, but a little bit sad because Chief Spinney is retiring May 30th. Is that your last day?
May 31st, Wednesday the 31st is my last day.
There you go. So why don't you give us a little bit about your background and then we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah, so I grew up in town. Grew up in Chelmsford my whole life. Went to college at University of Lowell at the time. And then when I graduated college, Massachusetts was in a little bit of a downturn. Mm-hmm. So as I tried to get into the criminal justice field, there were really no positions to be had. Chelmsford was laying off at the time. So I got my first opportunity in law enforcement up in New Hampshire. And I worked up in New Hampshire till 1994, at which time I was fortunate enough to be able to be hired by Chelmsford Police. And, I've had a great career. I really feel very fortunate. I worked my way through the ranks, and I've had the honor of being chief for 8.5 years, which brings us to my 32.5 years total in my career. And I've always been told you kind of know when you know. Mm-hmm. And I really started thinking strongly really last year that it's time to hand the baton off. And you want to do that when things are going well, and yes, the department's being efficient, and you have a great team to hand that off to. And I feel we're in a real great spot here in Chelmsford.
Well, I would have to agree with you. As you know, I'm a public safety fan, and being an observer of that situation, I think we're in very, very good shape, both police and fire. Public safety is alive and well in Chelmsford. And 33 years is a long time in any career these days, especially, as you say, as you've progressed up through the ranks. So you've done all the jobs.
Yeah, so I started out as a patrol officer, obviously, handling a sector in town. Mm-hmm. I was a patrol officer for just about 10 years, counting the 4 years in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And then I got promoted to patrol sergeant, which is kind of the foreman on the road. Mm-hmm. You're the patrol supervisor, and you oversee the officers on the street. And I was a sergeant from 2000 to 2005. And in 2005, I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant. And a lieutenant, in Chelmsford at least, is the shift commander. Mm. So now you oversee all operations.
For that shift.
And you also process all prisoners. You're responsible for prisoner care and custody, all the bail issues, things of that nature. Shift filling, a lot of administrative functionality for each shift. And then when Deputy Ubley retired in 2013, I was promoted to the rank of deputy chief, mm-hmm, with Chief Murphy at the time. Right. And I oversaw all department operations at that point in time. I was along with a slew of administrative responsibility. And surprisingly, it caught us a little bit off guard, at least me. Chief Murphy retired near the end of 2014.
I think people were kind of surprised when he did that.
Yeah, I was expecting more like 2015 for him. But then once he retired, I was fortunate enough to be appointed chief by Town Manager Cohen. And I've always kind of said, going up through the ranks, in addition to a lot of hard work, it's a lot of timing. Mm-hmm. The timing has to be there, because you need someone obviously to vacate, right, in order to go up. And sometimes you're on these promotional lists, because we take a state exam, mm-hmm, for the promotions. And you can sit on a list, and if no one leaves, the list comes to an end, and you have to test again. Mm-hmm. So there is definitely a timing element to it, and I feel very fortunate that things did play out the way they did.
Yes, and we've been very fortunate to have you all those years, and to have you for the last 8.5 as chief. You mentioned a little bit about civil service. Now, the chief is not in a civil service situation in Chelmsford. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it used to be.
Yes, I remember that.
So it used to be chief in Chelmsford and in many communities across Massachusetts. It was an exam. It was a written exam like the other ranks. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember when it started to change, probably in the early 90s. Communities started leaning more towards an appointment of the police chief, as well as fire chief and things of that level, because I think the community wants a good fit for the community, not just someone that would necessarily test high on a score.
Right.
If like my priorities weren't the same as the other departments in town or the community, but I test well on an exam, that might not be a good fit for the community. So with the position being appointed, obviously the town manager makes that appointment through various stages of testing. But he's also in consultation, and he answers to the Board of Selectmen,
Right.
or the Select Board, right? And the Select Board answers to the community. So it was a nice nexus of everybody having a say in who they think could be a good fit. And I think when you look back at Chief Murphy, Chief McCusker, Chief Karen, I think we've had a very successful run of very professional, progressive chiefs that have moved the department in a great direction.
I don't think there's any doubt, and I know all of the gentlemen, and I agree with your assessment 100%. I think the right decisions have been made, and I like it when you can have a situation where your department is large enough, progressive enough, and structured well enough where you can look internally to do these promotions. I mean, there are times when you want to go outside, and I'm thinking, for example, many years ago in the fire department, they were looking specifically for somebody with EMT background, which we didn't have. So we had to go to the outside and brought in Jack Parrow, and he was a good chief.
Yeah.
And but it's nice when you can have the expertise in-house and bring that along. I think we're very, very fortunate. So when you started 33 years ago, what differences have you seen in your
Yeah, it's been quite the tale, really, the differences. The big things for me that jump out now are, the outreach that you see police departments do now and the way we communicate. Back when I got on in the early 90s, everything was very secretive, closed. We didn't even do a very good job of communicating with our fellow departments. Even police department to police department wasn't that great. And we certainly didn't do a very good job communicating with our state and federal partners. There also wasn't as much communication or transparency to the public that you see today with social media. We put things on Twitter now, updating the public constantly what's going on. Facebook. We have Tips 411 now, where people can contact the police department anonymously and tell us something that's of a concern to them. It really goes on and on. Our outreach programs, our police athletic league, interacting with the kids. We have a youth police academy now. We have the resource police dog, Ozzy. None of these things existed. And it was a much more closed environment where people would see the officer and be like, ooh, I don't even know if I feel comfortable talking to him. So that's changed. We have the officers in the schools. That was completely non-existent just even 10 years ago.
I have to say that's worked out pretty well.
Yes, so that's obviously we want to build those relationships with the kids in town, and just build that support, that community support. Because even when things were really the lowest of the low across our country a few years ago, the support in Chelmsford stayed, and that's not by accident. It's because of the way we communicate with the community, and the community has trust in the police, and we have trust in the community, and so that's why even during some of those defunding conversations across the country, we didn't have that problem.
And I don't anymore because I'm getting older and your force is getting younger, but there was a time 15 years ago or so, I think I knew almost all of the officers. And just not a bad one on the lot. I mean, once, and I would measure them by when they're off duty.
Yeah.
And they're out in the community, and they interact with the public, and they understand that they're more than just a police officer, and I think that's very, very important. That was not true when I was growing up in the 1950s. You talk about differences. I mean, you're absolutely right. It was a closed society.
Well, off-duty conduct is huge now for us. When we bring people on board, we have, I bring it up, the deputy brings it up, the lieutenants bring it up, and we hire these people. Off-duty conduct and what's acceptable and the optics of what people see are very, very important. And we make that perfectly clear that the expectation is you will be better than the average person, on and off duty. So that will continue, I have no doubt. And to your point, we have a great department. It's funny, you say you don't know the officers anymore. There's times I walk by the report room now and I'm like, hey, because there's been so many changes. I mean, I'm kidding, but
Oh, Jim Murphy was famous for that.
yeah, just hey, how are you, officer? But
Yeah.
you know, it's a great group. I never would have lasted as long as chief without the way the department functions. It's everyone pulls in the same direction. You don't read things about Chelmsford officers in the
You
paper.
don't. You absolutely
You
don't.
can't say that about everybody around. And it's because of the mindset of hire hard to manage easy. And we've kind of kept that philosophy for a lot of years, and it's paid off.
Well, I think the quality of individually, as you alluded to, is outstanding that you bring in. And one of the main changes that I've noticed over the last 40 or 50 years is the educational requirements.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid growing up in my little town in the mid-'50s, I'm going to tell you maybe half the guys weren't high school graduates, okay?
Yep.
And they got almost no training when they came on. And the contrast between that situation and what you're doing today, you don't require a college degree, but it's strongly encouraged, and there's incentives for the officers to become better educated, and I think most of them take advantage of it.
Yeah, I would say over 90% of the department has college, and the academy is more in-depth and longer than ever. Our field training, it runs 3 months. There is educational incentives for the officers to have an associate's degree and a bachelor's degree, and that's the best money you could spend.
Absolutely.
Because you just get that polished, refined professional.
Yes, and it puts them more on a par with more of the community, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very important. And it's night and day. I compare 1955 to 2023, and it is absolutely night and day, you know, for all the police agencies, you know, state and local as
Yeah, I
well.
think back then, I think the departments were more of a response force to
Absolutely.
problems, like disturbance type incidents. There wasn't a lot of problem solving. Where now it's shifted towards, we go to an issue, it's solving the issue, whether it's a mental health issue or a substance use problem. That's why the officer's communication and education levels it's so well worth it.
Well, and I think that's the right mindset, and I very well, now I'm talking to you, I'm remembering. I remember the first time I actually met you. You probably don't remember. But I had just been elected to the select board. And one of the things we do is we march in the 4th of July parade. And I said to the town manager at the time, Bernie Lynch, I said, well, how do we get up to the starting point? Because we can't drive beyond a certain time, they close the roads. He says, the police will drive us. I said, oh, that's nice. And who shows up? A newly minted Lieutenant James Spinney.
Well, I gave you a ride to the
You
side.
gave,
Oh.
there were, I think, 3 of us, Bill Dalton, myself, and I think Phil Eliopoulos. I think you drove the 3 of us up,
Oh, that's
you know.
funny.
So that was my one-time riding in a Chelmsford police cruiser, thankfully, I will say.
Was the old Ford, must have been the Ford, the Crown Vic, right?
Yeah. Chief Murphy, I asked him, I said, everybody else is black and white. Why are we black and gray? He says, I don't like black and white. I like black and gray. So that was strictly his choice. I remember, and I thought that was,
Yeah, we've kept that.
I think it
I
is
think
sharp looking. It is sharp.
There's been talk,
Yeah.
you know, some of the officers want, we have some of the cars in the fleet that are all black. They're more of a semi-marked cruiser, the low-profile ones.
Right.
There's been talk, some of the officers would like the entire fleet to be that, but I've obviously resisted that because I like the contrast. I like the way the cars kind of jump out because you want the cars to be readily visible.
And there's a deterrent factor.
Yeah,
there,
and you
too.
want them to be seen both for that reason and for people, if they need something, they see the car, and you know, that's where the officers are, obviously. But no, I think our designs are professional, and they hit just the right note.
One of the things you just mentioned was you're talking about outreach, and I think for me, one of the largest differences is in the way you handle the drug situation. And I know that's changed legally in the last few years, but even before that time, I saw a movement especially among the local police agencies, to treat that more as an intervention type thing, as opposed to a criminal thing. So maybe you could elaborate.
Yeah, so Chelmsford really, I thought, was ahead of the curve a number of years ago with getting resources into the schools. we had, while other departments, I mean, obviously there was an enforcement piece. There was an enforcement piece, there was an arrest piece, but we put a lot of effort into that kind of deterrent piece at the school level, informational piece, I should say, where really getting to the kids before they start that experimentation and potential misuse. So we had detectives in the schools years ago, and that really paid off for us, especially when the opioid crisis hit, because we had already had things in place for that information, prevention through information. So that was a big piece for us, and it really helped us out when things really got bad in the region.
And as a corollary to that, I also remember you speaking at town meeting when the town manager was trying to fund the social worker position, Jen
Melanson?
Melanson. Yeah. Hello. 76 years old. I have a senior moment every so often. Yeah, I always, I thought that was critical, and quite frankly, I thought it was borderline outrageous that a town the size of Chelmsford did not have a paid full-time social worker on the payroll. I just, long overdue. And yet there were people that were bitterly opposed to that, you know,
So
funding that position. And I remember you sold it when you got up and you explained how you would work with that person, you know, with the outreach and so on and so forth. And I thought that was critical. And I thought it was a great example of the shift in policing mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
So in addition to her position, which was great the town moved that way because, as you know, there's so many tentacles of mental health issues affecting the community. Domestic violence, homelessness, substance use disorders. We were doing all we could. We have a clinician now that's in Chelmsford 4 days a week, embedded in the police department.
Oh, okay.
And actually goes to calls with the officers. So that's been huge for us. That's really got up and going the last couple of years. But yeah, I was an advocate for that because there's so many issues, whether it's hoarding. There was just things that we couldn't just handle alone. So I really felt it was the town's responsibility to have a point person to deal with these issues. And obviously in collaborative effort with Board of Health and the police department. So I think it's worked out well.
I mean, I understand that the officers get some training in that area, but you're not trained social service specialists.
Right, and especially in a particular area like, you know, homelessness, hoarding, et cetera, there was only so far we could go with it, where some of these people really needed to have a lot of time dedicated to them, one-on-one. So that position, I agree, was really necessary.
You know, and it's great. And again, it was, I think your speech at town meeting might have converted some folks. So very, very important. Which kind of leads me to another question, and I think we've partially already answered that in some of our discussion, but the working relationship that your department and you as chief have with the town administration, town manager, and other departments. Just from an outsider looking in, to me it appears to be about as good as it could be.
Yeah, I would agree. So it was a priority for me when I took over as chief. And not that we weren't before. Chief Murphy was an excellent collaborative partner in the community. And I definitely wanted to continue that philosophy. And I've made it a point to really speak, if not weekly, daily, to, you know, Chief Ryan at the fire department, and DPW director, Christine Clancy, before her, Gary Persichetti, the town manager's office. His staff's been great. I'm probably over there a couple times a week, just, you know, going over budget issues and needs of the department and the community. Everyone, what's really impressed me from day one is how everyone pulls in the same direction. We meet in some cases weekly. There's a group of us that meet weekly with the town manager.
So that would be like staff meeting of department heads?
Yeah, just a few of us though, just, you know, DPW, police, fire, some planning board, building inspector type of things, Board of Health. We meet every week, just to all be on the same page. And what has always impressed me again is there's no gotcha moments. It's always pulling in the same direction. And if something's a little outside what should be, we all talk about it and get together on it. And I've always appreciated that.
I think it's a great, I spent many years in management on the civilian side, if you will, but really it's no different. I mean, you may be the subject matter expert, but one of your colleagues may see something you don't see.
Yep.
and that'll come out in that discussion. And as you said, everybody benefits. It's a very good way to manage, I think.
And it's not all that, it's not the same way everywhere. I talk to other
Oh.
chiefs across the region. Sometimes it's really, personality conflicts.
Oh, yes.
And I've really always felt very grateful for how we are here.
Well, that's good, and it does appear that our town administration, Manager Cohen, fosters that kind of environment, which is, I think, very beneficial for the town and the town's people. So we touched a little bit on the duties. Let's talk for a minute on staffing. What is your current sworn officer complement now?
Yeah, so we're budgeted for 54, okay? In my opinion, we should be closer to 60.
And I remember there was a time when I think we were 60 or 61.
Yes, we were 61.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, so that's correct. We were 61 back, I think, in the late 90s. So we're at 54. We fluctuate here and there. Like right now, we're up to 56 because we have to proactively hire before retirements because it takes us a year to put someone on the road.
Right.
Between hiring them and all that goes with that, the police academy 6 months, and field training runs over 3. So it's about a year before you get an officer that's viable on the street performing his duties. So because of that fact, you don't want to run low, so we preemptively hire. So right now we're at 56. So that's 56 officers, typically on a shift. You might have 5 officers covering the town of 36,000 people. Our calls for service go up every year. I think last year we had over 35,000 interactions. 35,000.
Think about that, folks. Okay, 37,000 population, 4 or 5 officers on the road, and sometimes less, depending on the shift, right?
Sometimes overnight it can drop. Sometimes during the day, if everyone's in, we can be heavy, we can be 6 or 7. But I've tried to explain, I explained this once at town meeting when something came up about traffic enforcement, that we are a calls for service driven department, which means the officers are not driving around with no calls, being able to run radar all day. Radar is important.
The number is 36,000 a year or something
Yep,
like that?
yep.
Yeah.
So the officers try to squeeze in traffic enforcement whenever they can, but they have a lot of calls to go to. When you put it all together, there's a lot of calls in this community, whether it's disturbances or suspicious activity or motor vehicle accidents or medicals, legal questions. It adds up. It adds up for 5 guys on the street typically, or officers, I should say.
It seems like not enough to me, okay?
There are days when it's not
Just
enough.
my opinion.
Well, there are days where it's not enough.
Yeah.
And calls have to wait.
And, people call in sick.
Yep.
They have to take vacations. And so that leads me to another question now. We've just gone through police reform. Maybe we want to talk a little bit about that. But one thing I heard you say the other night that I was not aware of, maybe you can explain it a little bit. My understanding was that because of the police reform requirements, that has meant that we've discontinued our auxiliary police?
That's correct.
Now, why is that?
So the auxiliary officers, because they don't actually perform full-time cruiser shifts, they did not achieve the minimum hourly requirement to be recognized as police officers under the new reform law.
Oh,
So we had to phase them out, and that cost us about 15 individuals that used to help us out at the parades and other large town events in the community.
freeing up regular officers for
Right.
other duty. That's
Yep,
very
and
important.
the auxiliaries would volunteer their time to do those things. So that has resulted in us having to put force officers on some of these events, on overtime, et cetera. So we've had to make some adjustments with the parade routes and some other events, but we seem to be in a good place now, but it wasn't easy.
And we don't, as a town, we don't employ part-time officers or special police.
No,
I
that
know
was
in the
ano-
smaller towns they do that.
Well, the reform laws put an end to that also.
Really?
Yes, you have to receive
Wow.
the same training now. There's no more, if you're a special officer, you have to go to the full-time police academy to continue.
Okay, all right. Because I know in Carlisle they have a number of, or had, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, so they'll need to attend another academy or receive supplemental training to bring them up.
I see.
But you have to have that minimum.
But they can still work part-time.
Yes, as long as they go to that extra training.
I see, okay, all right, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So, Yeah, so that's obviously impacted your operation, because if you don't have the auxiliaries out there doing that kind of duty, you have to assign a regular officer.
And they also helped us out on weather events.
Yes.
We had a serious storm or road closures, they would come out and help us. So that was another adjustment we had to make.
Wow. Or an emergency event.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's good to know, and I think it's good for the townspeople to know that, you know, maybe an unintended consequences, they say, of
Yep.
a police
Yeah,
reform.
we were disappointed with that part of the new reform law.
But the other aspects of it you feel have been beneficial.
Yeah, there was some hiccups for us. We had to, not huge changes, because we were already ahead of the curve with a number of our use of force policies, but we had to make some changes that were mandated and rewrite some things that we were pretty much already doing anyway, but it had to be reflected in the policy. So there were some things we had to do, but we're completely where we need to be.
And I also recall a few years ago you went through I'll call it a certification process.
Accreditation?
Accreditation.
Right. Yeah, we were
Accreditation.
certified, so the first step is certification. And then we've accredited now, I want to say, going on 9 years.
Now, is that going to be a requirement for all departments in the state, or is that something that's optional?
I'm hearing because of the reform law, the accreditation will almost be a mandate. Because you almost need to be accredited to satisfy some of the provisions of the
That
reform
makes
law.
perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, top 3 problems facing the community in terms of police service.
Yeah, it's hard to break it down to 3, but I can tell you what we primarily go to. We go to, they call it like the caretaker, public caretaker calls. Those are our well-being checks, medicals. We have a lot of calls now where someone will post something on Facebook they want to do harm to themselves. So we go to all those. It's more than other, again, the mental health issues.
So you've got somebody actually monitoring the social media.
Well, no, what will happen is someone will call us saying, hey, my friend just posted
Oh, they've
something on
seen
Facebook,
something.
can you
Okay.
please check on him? So there's the public caretaker things we go to, there's the quality of life issues we deal with quite a bit, neighbor disturbances, traffic problems, and then there's the more serious things, suspicious activity, a fight, domestic violence, burglaries, assault and batteries, your more serious disturbance types calls. So unwanted. So when you put it all together and you add the other little things like legal advice, motor vehicle accidents that need to be investigated even at a later time to see who was at fault, it's a busy day.
Oh, absolutely. I can remember when your facility was upgraded 20 years ago, and people were asking me, well, why do we need that? You know, it's a small town. I said, you have no idea how busy the police are. You just have no idea.
No,
you know.
I really wish
A lot of
people
calls.
could ride in the cruiser for a night or two.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Jim, we've got about a minute left. You're retiring May 31st. Is there any imparting wisdom you'd like to leave with us or the town as you exit?
Yeah, it's been an honor to be chief, to work with these individuals that make me so proud every day. Working with this community that's been so supportive, I really couldn't ask for anything more. You know, and I wish the next chief all the best. And the department will continue to be the professional department that it is today. I have no doubt.
And great message, and I believe that process of selecting a new chief is now ongoing, and probably we'll know soon enough who that is. And we wish the new person all the luck in the world, and very fortunate to have inherited the department from you in the shape that you've left it.
No, thank you.
So-
I appreciate that.
And we're going to miss you, and I personally will miss you, and I'll miss the friendship that we've had over the years in talking to you, and I've learned a great deal from you about policing, you know, of all things.
It's been great interacting, and I'll still be around, so you'll probably run
That's
into me.
good. Oh, well, yes, yeah, don't be a stranger. So again, Jim, good luck in your retirement, and we hope that we'll see you around town.
Thanks very much, guys.